I know you're gonna dig this.
This is Rhine McLin, host of the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center's award-winning show, Funk Chronicles, recorded live here at DATV Studios in Dayton, Ohio. And now, my studio guests are multi-instrumentalists, Tony Allen and Deron of Dayton Funk All-Stars. Welcome, gentlemen. So happy to have you here.
Oh, happy to be here.
Well, you know what? I just want to start off because you're homegrown and you call yourself the Dayton Funk All-Stars, and that means that you have a real connection to funk. So tell me, Deron, you start off with, how did you get started? Are you a Dayton native? Did you go to public schools here? Tell me how you got started, and then it'll be your turn, Tony.
Well, I got started. First of all, yes, I am a Dayton native, but my music career actually got started at home. My grandparents, they were musicians. My parents were musicians, and they said I used to crawl around on the floor playing on the organ pedals of the Hammond B3 organ that was in the family piano room. But then, growing up in church, New Hope Missionary Baptist Church, in my earlier years, that's where I cut my teeth watching the musicians there. And at the age of 14, we were actually writing music for our choir, our music director was Renee Hobbs. And we got the opportunity to work with the Dayton Philharmonic Orchestra. They had taken her original music, and of course we were just a church band, just teenagers playing in the band. And we got a chance to work with, at the time, he's deceased now, God rest his soul, but Isaiah Jackson, a gentleman who had selected us, and her songs that they actually scored the music to, about 4 or 5 of her originals, and we actually performed them with the Dayton Philharmonic Orchestra. So that actually exposed us, and that was a platform that opened the doors to the music industry and what's out there and what you could do with your music. But then later on in life, I ran into this gentleman by the name of Tony Allen, who was good friends of my father, and I'll let him tell more of that story. But what I will say is he actually, during my career, when he created the Dayton Funk All-Stars, had me to go out to Los Angeles, California. And it wasn't about my talent at the time as much as it was about the mentoring and being exposed to the music industry. So he and a team of some of his colleagues just took me on like a little brother, but more so as father figures too, and introduced me to the global industry and what you can do just beyond being a musician. And from that point on, we just began to create opportunities for other youth out here.
Now, what is your instrument?
The foundation is percussion, drums. And then I picked up bass, and then obviously piano a little bit later in life. I had to play saxophone and other instruments, being a product of Dunbar High School. Our music teachers didn't just let us play, what we wanted. We had to learn multiple instruments.
I had to clear that up because, the last instrument that we heard you talk about was playing the pedals. Of the Hammond.
Right, yeah.
So,
I was crawling on the floor.
So I wanted to clear that up. Now, was that Isaiah Jackson that was the first African American Philharmonic director?
That is absolutely correct. He came to our church, and he provided a platform for us to be a part of the orchestra for a night of original music that Renee Hobbs had written, you know, for our youth choir at the church, and it was an amazing opportunity and mentorship that happened.
You know, some people probably don't remember Isaiah Jackson, but it was really interesting because of African American music goes all the way back into our history, where we were even, although we're talking about funk music, it goes back to classical music. And to have an African American to be the head of the conductor, or what they call a maestro, of the Dayton Philharmonic at that time was very historic, as well as so many other things that have happened in this city.
And just to add to that, where funk got infused in there, right after that experience, my freshman year, I ran into a young man, well, we were just freshmen at the time, by the name of Vargas Thomas, who was from the group New Horizons, who was tied into the Zap Camp. He awarded me the opportunity to play with their band, and from that point on, I was introduced to Terry Trotman and Dale DeGrove, and Lester Trotman, and we're all still friends, and they're still doing mentoring today, which will really, really come together as, you know, Tony actually explains the birth of the Dayton Funk All-Stars.
Okay, we're going to turn to Tony. I was going to say something else, but I decided I was going to be polite. And so, Tony, tell us about your birth from, are you native Daytonian?
Yes, I am.
And you went to school around here?
Yes,
Where'd you
did.
go?
I went to Roosevelt. Oh, don't go on. I give all my credits and interests to Mr. Don Sutton. He was my teacher. I marched in the Roosevelt High School marching band in 1969. And he had me playing tuba.
Tuba?
Tuba, yeah. I started as a
tuba Tony. That has a ring to
player. And from there, I went over to bass guitar. That's a bass instrument. And from then on, I started working in music stores and playing in bands. Back in the early day, I had a band, the Overhill Gang. We do a lot of shows with the Ohio players.
I remember the Overhill Gang. Yeah,
we were pretty good, and it was just a great childhood, because growing up in Dayton in my era, there were bands on every street, so funk was everywhere. It was coming about. I was real close with Walter Junie Morrison. And I worked in a music store for about 20 years. I left Dayton and went to work for one of the largest music manufacturers in the world, Roland Corporation. I was a senior trainer for Roland for 10 years, and I traveled across the country teaching people technology, different instruments. I play bass, horns, guitars. I write. I've had a recording studio for about 35 years.
What's the name of it?
It's called Tone Control Studios, but it's just my own studio.
Oh, it's your personal
It's personal,
studio.
yeah.
Okay.
It's personal. It's nice, high tech. One day I'll put it online, let people look in it. One of these days. But back in 2000, I was contacted by Cato Mayberry, and he and I worked together at the Dayton Black Cultural Festival, and we talked about this. We put a group together with Dayton boys that would do all Dayton music. So that's how D-Funk got started. We call it D-Funk, but it's the Dayton Funk All-Stars. So we put a band together. Actually, Deron was the last member to come to the band, and is the last surviving member among myself. He will get the reins once I retire, which I'm going to retire from playing. I've been doing Jimi Hendrix. I'm the #1 Jimi Hendrix impersonator in the country. I go all around the world playing Jimi. I learned to play the guitar in 6 months. Real dedicated. I teach. let's go back to D-Funk.
I want to go back to the Jimi Hendrix
go back to
thing.
Jimmy?
I want to go back to that because Jimi Hendrix,
Yes,
playing the guitar the way Jimi Hendrix played.
yes.
And do you do the mouth thing
I do
at all?
the whole rendition.
Wow, because you know he has a song, and just to digress for a moment, I've never heard it any other way, but I really like it, and that's the Battle Hymn of Republic.
Okay.
And I have the album, and that he plays that on, and it was like a live thing, and it
Yes.
was just awesome, and it was just fascinating. And the fact that Jimi Hendrix is from Seattle, Washington, which you would never have thought.
Right.
So I have to really want to catch one of those shows because Jimi Hendrix was just a phenomenal guitarist, and so if you are the best impersonator of Jimi Hendrix, that is something to be seen.
Yeah, I've been able to travel the world doing Jimmy, and it's been very great. I've met his family. I've got pictures on the internet with me and Janie, his sister, and I mean, my Jimi Hendrix experience is long, so I really want to just stay with D-Funk.
Oh, well,
yeah,
how many members are in the D-Funk band?
it's 10
10.
members.
And what are the instrument range?
Well, we have 3 keyboard players. I play guitar and bass. Deron plays keyboard, guitar and bass, and drums. A drummer, 3 horns, sometimes 4. Lead singer. That's basically D-Funk. The whole concept of it, putting it together, was to evolve into all the groups that we were emulating. So we put our show together and we moved the talent in and off the stage without stopping the show. So,
Which was characteristic
Yeah.
of the early funk
bands, yeah.
funk bands. And another thing about the funk bands, that especially with your group, you have such synergy on the stage when you are performing, and you engage the audience to get involved, which was another element of funk music.
Right.
But how did you actually decide that? So is it contributed to Cato Mayberry Sr.
Yes.
To bring this band together for the Cultural Black Festival, and you've been together ever since?
Yes, ma'am. That's right.
Yeah, 18 years.
18 years. This summer, 18 years. I would fly back to Dayton and keep the band going, and we'd play we would play every year, 4 or 5 places. We just keep it going till I moved back in 2010. I moved back to Dayton from Atlanta, and kept it going.
What do you think makes Dayton such a birth of funk?
Growing up hearing it every day, WDAO. I got to give all my credit to WDAO and Turk Logan and those guys, the Ragman. They laid the foundation for good music in the Midwest.
That's important because the Midwest has been, a lot of times people want to give credit to the East Coast, and they had their form of music, well, P-Funk, but nothing like the funk,
Right.
which comes out of Dayton and attributed to the Midwest region.
All right, and also to add to that, when following, behind his footsteps and leaderships and mentorship, I quickly think about the times, the opportunity that I had to play, with Zap, which was in 2011. They were actually, the band, obviously playing behind Shirley Murdoch. It was a concert at the Hare Arena. Shirley was on stage with Marvin Sapp, and I was actually a fill-in drummer because Lester Trotman, the drummer, was taking care of some bus run business, and And so I got the opportunity to fill in, in rehearsals. But what I got from that, and what I got from that beyond the stage, the mentoring, the learning how to play at different levels as far as execution as a professional musician, something that you don't get, necessarily just playing for a talent show or just taking band in school. What I got from them and their leadership was, first of all, the opportunity to perform with them, and then second of all, the relationships that still sustain. Recently playing with For and Behind Shirley for the Gospel Fest. Having those relationships coming from, music from that era, and that's still going on to now, first of all, is keeping the legacy alive. Having the Funk Museum as a place for this legacy to be exhibited and to meet, some of our stars, or to learn of the history, is so important. And lastly, us being responsible for going back into our community, working with the youth. For example, I just spent, along with a couple other musicians, in DeSoto Bass at the community center, working with West Dayton Strong, giving, free music lessons, music theory, taking today's technology, electronic instruments, into the community for after-school programs, and also inside the juvenile justice systems, So funk is, it goes beyond the record, it goes beyond the stage. It's unity in our community and more.
Amen.
Wow, so I'm almost like, ooh. Okay, so, but the other thing I wanted to say, let's go back, and you have said this several times, both of you, alluding to the fact about how important mentorship is and how important it had impacted your lives. So, and you're giving back. So how do the students, the young people receive you? When are they open to listening, or is music helping them transform to a different level that they're not able to get in the educational system as it is today?
Well, from my end of it, actually, which I learned some of the techniques from Tony here, I infused traditional instruments along with today's technology, and we actually present the youth with them in restorative practices circles. So if you put yourself in the frame of mind of drum circles, or just getting around, with bongos or timbales or guitars, well, now we've added the technology to it. So infusing in traditional instrumentation along with music theory, but more importantly, the face-to-face relationship building time has played a significant role in sustaining what I would say is a positive model of keeping music alive and interest, out of young people.
Curious, has the Dayton Funk All-Stars traveled outside of Dayton to other places?
Oh, yeah.
Name 3 places that you've been. Let's go out of Ohio.
Okay.
Okay.
Atlanta.
Okay.
Louisville.
Help me.
Gosh,
we play all over.
Yeah, we play all over because we're a body all in together, and then we break off and do different things in representing the organization. So,
I understand that, but I was just naming
so Georgia,
okay.
Louisville, Kentucky. I mean, we were there with Lettucey and After 7. We've been, some places outside the city representing the Dayton sound.
And that's important. That's what I was trying to get to. And now, all these places you've been, you only can give me Georgia and Kentucky. You've been to Michigan?
Yeah, we've been to Michigan.
Illinois?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to, I was trying.
Well, actually, I lived in Illinois.
Yeah, you lived there.
I lived there for a while when I was working with Roland. And the thing about the Dayton Funk All-Stars, it consists of an all-star band. When I was putting the group together, I wanted all the musicians that already played with other bands and not let D-Funk be your core band. So like I do Hendrix, Deron has his band, the other members, they have their own bands. So we come together, we're special.
You're a
team.
fusion.
We're an all-star team.
You're a fusion.
Yes.
You're a fusion. And I think that's what makes you so unique and so sustaining. And I think it also shows the maturity of your group to be able to do that and still maintain the core the funk, all-star funk, but being able to be individualists but when it's time to come together, everybody's ego goes away,
That's right.
and you melt into the fusion of the Dayton Funk All-Stars, which is you need to be congratulated for that, because especially in a time now where everything it's all about me.
And it's interesting you mention that when you talk about the infusion, and the young people. One thing that comes to mind was we did a concert not long ago, and it was at what was Residence Park Elementary, but is now World of Wonder. Very interesting concept. So imagine, if you will, the Dayton Funk All-Stars, with all the lights, all the glam, the costuming, the talk boxes, the guitars on the stage at the school. The audience with all these parents here, sitting up in the bleachers. And then in the center, we had every grade level from kindergarten up to 8th grade. Now watch this. They went, and first of all, the youth at the school had studied the background on the Dayton groups. Then they took it a step further. So for example, let's say from kindergarten to 2nd grade, they had studied like heat wave, and so like when we did Always and Forever, they were like waving hearts in the air. And very interesting. And then as the grades got higher, each grade level had some type of performance by all the students in that grade level while we performed the songs. I remember, I don't know if it was like the 4th or the 5th graders.
One guy played with us when we did Slave.
Right.
That just sounds great.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to ask you guys. Name me 3 highlights of your career so far.
I would say one sticks out for me is when we shared the stage with the Ohio players at the Schuster. That was a powerful night. That was a powerful night, education-wise and performance-wise. That was a good night.
Myself, many highlights.
I'm talking about the funk group, the Funk All-Stars.
Oh, the Funk All-Stars?
3 highlights of the Dayton Funk All-Stars.
Well, it has to be every night. Every night. Every night.
I mean, we shared the stage with Zap. Where we were up in Akron, Ohio. It was an outdoor amphitheater, and then there's the whole educational component behind it. I mean, the highlights are.
Oh, I'm sure now they're numerous, but okay. But we're talking about, just like you mentioned, the one with the Schuster Center. Okay, that's a highlight. That's one that we'll always remember, and you demonstrated that because it was the first thing that came out.
Well, during that time, during the life of the D-Funk All-Stars, I've had a lot of privileges to play with a lot of different other groups. Like, one of my most highlights is I played with the P-Funk All-Stars.
Oh.
I went on tour with them. I did cameo appearance with the original Lakeside at the Black Festival. Deron came to that. I played with many groups. I was also a member of Sun. I played on the Sun Over the Universe.
I have their albums.
Yeah, my name's on the album. The highlight for D-Funk, Troy Music Festival. Troy Music Festival, we have a blast down there. That's been a really good thing for us. We've done it every year for the last 3 years. This year we'll be doing it again, this in July. The Funk of July, which we coined, we call it the Funk of July because it sounds like the 4th of July. So around the 4th of July, we do the Funk of July. And I think one of the real highlights was the time that we put together the Dayton Big Show, where we played like 4 or 5 songs from all the groups from Dayton, and we played a 3.5-hour nonstop show. The Funk of July.
Well, and
that was a highlight.
See, that I knew you could do it, guys. Now, I will ask you personally, and I'll start with Tony since he wanted to go there. 3 highlights of your career.
Meeting Bootsy when I was 17 years old, hanging out. He's been a great friend of mine throughout my life. Playing Las Vegas, having my own show there, and going to Brazil. That was fun.
I'm sure.
Went to Brazil with Son.
Ah.
And it's highlights.
All right. What are your 3 highlights?
My 3 highlights, well, the first one I mentioned earlier was the opportunity to play with the Dayton Philharmonic Orchestra. Another, playing with Zach. You know, and I don't know if the highlight was more the performance or the rehearsal or what it took to get that position. And it was, and honestly, it was that one time, but it was that experience and that highlight that instilled in me what I'm now passing on to others. Another highlight is the opportunity to actually pass this on in our community. That's the biggest highlight, because what makes it a highlight is when I see the spark of life in youth, when those that are in situations where they might not have access to the instruments, but we're blessed now to have a funk museum where they can go right downtown and see history, but then we can go, those of us that are out here in the community doing the work, the highlight is creating the platforms so the legacy will continue.
You know, legacy is extremely important.
Very.
And that's why I am so devoted, and I'm so glad that you are too, to the essential importance of the Funk Music Hall of Fame.
Yes.
And that it has so many avenues that it will travel to continue our little legacies here. And just having the Funk Chronicles and being able for you to tell your story, that down the road, under that mentorship, they will see this, and you know, who would have thought 25 years ago that we would have shows like this that could be on YouTube, and you know, they can go and they look up your name, and there they'll see it, and it was kind of like, oh, I remember him. He came to my neighborhood, helped me with this, and that to me is legacy. Now, gentlemen, now that I have smoothed that over, now I want to hear the 3 most interesting things, and you know, they could be funny, self-effacing, you know, but to know that it's not all smooth sailing. So, what are your 3, Tony?
Well, I always say, being a long-time musician, you really haven't been a musician unless you lived homeless. Okay? I left Dayton at 19 years old and went out on the road, and my mother never knew this, but I lived homeless. But I wouldn't stop. I didn't call home and say, I need to come home, I don't have anywhere to live. But I let my instrument be my vehicle to take me to the next day. And I was able to survive. And many of my friends, like Steve and a bunch of these guys that's in a lot of these well-known groups, they have lived homeless. So that's an experience getting out there in music. Things has changed today because of technology. You can do everything at home or you can do everything on your phone. But it's a touching situation, but to really say you really worked for it, you had to struggle a little. Nothing was given to anyone from the Ohio players on back. I guarantee you, each one of those guys got a story like mine, which is too long to tell. But I just really want to say that. Another thing was, Deron brought me to Dayton one time, and he was working in Central State, and he brought me down to show my technology. I'm real big into technology. And I was demonstrating some product, and these kids were just so focused and happy. And I said, Deron, man, these are some good kids. But music changed their whole attitude. And that was touching in my life. okay? And just everyday life, you know, living in Dayton, Ohio. I love Dayton. I'm glad I'm back here. A lot of people ask me, why'd you come back to Dayton? But I just want to say this. It don't matter where you live at. We all wake up to the same day.
Very good.
Okay?
Deron, that's going to be a tough act to follow, but go ahead.
What, some interesting things?
Yes.
Growing up, wow. Wow, what they call it back in the day, government housing? Yeah. It wasn't always easy. However, the vision was always there and the opportunity was always there to play music in some kind of way. And so to keep it short and to the point, keeping the faith, positive mentoring, and even as Tony just mentioned, when he had come down to work with some youth that were, it was actually a camp for boys that were labeled at risk, but we call them geniuses, and just wanted to create the positive atmosphere for them to be exposed to some things, gave us a chance because we could relate, but it hasn't always been easy, but we've never quit.
That's so important. Now, my highlight for you guys is the ribbon cutting of the Dayton Funk Museum.
Oh, that was a big night.
Okay, so talk about that a little bit.
What, the ribbon cutting?
The ribbon cutting, you being there.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, to be asked to be a part of that was just a blessing and an honor. And I remember getting a call from David Webb, and he's like, hey brother, who I've known a very long time. And how the vetting process of that came about, I don't know. And it wasn't just us, you know, Touch was there, current and former recording artists were there, and the community was there. The night of that ribbon cutting just let me know and let us know that we have a responsibility to represent the legacy of music that was created on this soil here. And but the ribbon cutting, my opinion, is the launching pad of more to come, but we also have a responsibility to make sure that the melodies continue of new music to come from our younger musicians and vocalists and artists out here, period. And anything you want to add to that?
Well, you know Dayton's got good water, right? They always say the funk is in the water from Dayton. And that's how it comes about.
I like that concept. You know, the one thing about the funk music that, and you relate it to, they call it R&B, but it's still funk music because of the instruments. And so many times you go to see a concert and it's like 1,000 guitars. I'm just exaggerating. Maybe a drum and a keyboard, okay? But when you talk about funk music, you talk about horns, you talk about the diversity of instruments that brings that music together. And I just think that's why funk will always have a place and have a rebirth at different times. Because you see, even some of the rappers go back and you hear the funk music in the background, and they grab it because, you know, it's solid.
It's solid.
And one of the things that I always find that's so fascinating, and you mention it, and I'm just bringing it together here, is that music is a universal language. No matter where you are, who you're with, no matter what. You know, even when you get into racial tensions and stuff, music soothes the soul. And so many times, I just wish I could be the Pied Piper with the flute to calm the souls of people, because music will really, the power of music goes from history even down to the Bible. They always talk about music.
That's right, and you know, you just made me think of something else just to add. When we mention the mentoring that comes along with this funk music, you know, what's under that umbrella is also the conversations about copyright, publishing, distribution, licensing, you know, how to perform it. And Tony, you might want to add to
paid
that.
for it.
But right, and getting paid for it. So, and I think you mentioned earlier about just, you know, just things that happen in other artists' careers earlier, you know, when your works aren't protected and things of that nature. So I just want to make sure we clarify that when we talk about mentoring, we're not just talking about grooving and getting funky with music. We're talking about there's music and then there's the business. And we have to make sure that we educate, you know, our young people that, you know, along with the funk, you know, there's the music business education that comes right along with that. So we need to keep our museum alive and to also grow it because of having space where they can come learn about the history and then us learn about the new funk music, you know, that they're birthing, and even more importantly, how to protect it, you know, also get compensated for it properly and sustain it.
And I think that's really important. Gentlemen, and we're wrapping up, and we'd like to give a special thank you to Mrs. Johnny Wilder for being at the Funk Center's open house.
Yes,
and,
yes.
You know, she's a phenomenal woman.
Yes.
And so, with that, I would like to say, this time I'm gonna give it to you, Darren, because I know I feel like I've been a little unfair letting Tony just come out there. But no, I just kidding. Tony left me speechless. But what would you like to, your final comments be?
My final comments would be support the Funk Museum, support our community, and support music education in public schools.
Thank you. Tony?
I like to see more of the guys that's right here, homegrown Dayton musicians, like groups from the guys Slave and some of the other groups. I like to see them get a little bit more involved and show up a little bit more to help out, because you guys are really working hard to keep this going, and I think it's very important. Dayton is so powerful. A lot of times I'm on the phone with people, and they say, "You from Dayton?" The whole conversation goes to the funk. Do you know? Have you seen? They walk around. You know where they live at. You see them at the store. We see these people too. So I just want us to have a grip.
I would like to thank you, Darren, and you, Tony, so much for being on Funk Chronicles. This is Rhine McLin, host of the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center's award-winning show, Funk Chronicles. Until the next time, keep it funky.
Oh, yeah.
Just go from man to man. I just don't seem to understand why you're so very hard to take. You sweet sticky thing.